Section 3 Childhood Imprints shall the early years program your current reality. There was a version of you, small, open, radically alive, who received the world without filters, who absorbed everything, who had no choice but to believe what the world showed them about themselves. Between the ages of 0 and 7, the human brain exists in a state of consciousness that neuroscientists classify as predominantly theta and delta. You read those words correctly. The brainwave states that you are now deliberately cultivating through this practice the states that we describe as hypnagogic, as the gateway to subconscious programming, are the default states of the child's developing brain. A child under the age of 7 is, neurologically speaking, almost permanently in a state of deep hypnosis. Long pause of this is the scientific basis of what the developmental biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton calls the programmable mind of early childhood. The child's brain, operating primarily in theta, lacks the critical filter that the adult brain develops, the prefrontal cortex's executive gatekeeping function. Without this filter, every piece of information, every emotional experience, every repeated observation of how the world works and how people behave and what the child deserves, flows directly into the subconscious, without evaluation, without question, without the possibility of conscious rejection. Think of the child's mind not as a computer running software, but as a computer that is writing its own software in real time, based entirely on the data it receives from the environment, the parents, the siblings, the teachers, the culture, the religion, the economic circumstances. All of these are not merely shaping the child's conscious memories. They are writing the child's subconscious operating system, the deep-level programs that will, for decades to come, generate the child's beliefs about safety, love, worthiness, abundance, belonging, identity. Deep breath. This process is related to what neuroscientists call critical period plasticity. The brain is not equally plastic throughout life. There are specific windows of time, critical periods, during which the brain is exquisitely, almost frantically sensitive to particular types of experience, and during which the neural circuits that process those experiences are being laid down with extraordinary permanence. The most important critical period for the formation of the fundamental sense of self occurs in those first 7 years. During this period, the developing brain is guided by a principle that neuroscientist Carl Schatz summarized in a phrase that has since become one of the most cited maxims in all of neuroscience. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time the child experiences an event that triggers a particular emotional response, fear, shame, joy, belonging, rejection, the neurons associated with that event and that emotion fire together. Each firing makes the connection between them slightly stronger, slightly more automatic, slightly more permanent. Neuroscience note the process by which repeated co-activation of neurons strengthens their synaptic connections is known as long-term potentiation, LTP. It is mediated largely by NMDA receptors at the synapse, involves the insertion of additional AMPA receptors into the postsynaptic membrane, making the synapse more efficient, more wired. This is the molecular basis of learning and memory, and it is particularly powerful during developmental critical periods. Long pause. Consider then what this means for the ordinary experiences of childhood. The child who repeatedly hears, whether explicitly in words or implicitly through tone, through neglect, through conditional love, that they are not quite enough, not quite smart enough, not quite good enough, not quite lovable enough. Each repetition of this message, each emotional confirmation of this belief, strengthens the neural circuits associated with unworthiness, with shame, with the sense that love is conditional and scarce. By the age of 7, these circuits have been so thoroughly reinforced that they have become part of the subconscious architecture. They no longer require conscious thought to activate. They fire automatically beneath the threshold of awareness. In any situation that pattern matches to the original experience, any situation that feels, however remotely, like rejection, inadequacy, or not enoughness. Deep breath. There is a dimension to this early programming that goes even deeper than personal experience. The emerging science of epigenetics suggests that we inherit not only our genetics, the DNA, sequences that code for our physical characteristics, but also the epigenetic marks that determine how those genes are expressed. These marks, which are chemical tags on the DNA molecule, can be altered by Pioneering research by Rachel Yehuda at Mount Sinai Hospital demonstrated that the children of Holocaust survivors show measurable alterations in cortisol regulation, the same alterations found in the survivors themselves. The stress of the parents had left a biological signature on the children's stress response systems, despite the fact that the children had never experienced the trauma directly. We inherit, in other words, not only our grandparents' eye color, but something of their fear, long pausing and yet, and this is where the science becomes deeply, profoundly hopeful, the same plasticity that made the child's brain so susceptible to negative programming also makes the adult brain capable of reprogramming. The same biological mechanisms that wrote those early imprints can be used to write new ones. The septic connections that encoded I am not enough can be gradually, patiently weakened through a process neuroscientists call septic proning, while new connections encoding I am worthy, I am safe, I belong can be strengthened through deliberate, repeated activation. The key is accessing the same neurological states in which the original programming was written. The theta state, the state you are in right now, because the subconscious mind, that vast and ancient repository of your earliest experiences, is most accessible, most open to revision, to compassionate re-examination, to gentle rewiring in precisely this state of relaxed, receptive, dreaming consciousness. Deep breathe. So let us make peace for a moment with the child who was programmed before they could consent to be. Let us speak to that small, open, radically alive person who received what the world gave them because they had no other choice. You were not broken by your early experiences. You were shaped by them, which is entirely different, and shapes can be reshaped. That is, in fact, the whole extraordinary point. To the child within, you were always enough. The stories that said otherwise were written by people who were themselves in pain, who were themselves running programs they did not choose. Their limitations were never your truth. Tonight